Hi, my name is Earnest Wang, and I'm a rising senior at Cal studying public health and economics. I spent the summer working with Nissan Arad and Aparna Higgins, studying technology transfer in the context of drug development and pricing. We are interested in federally funded R&D efforts in the pharmaceutical industry because of high drug prices, especially those developed using public funds for R&D. Amid the nation's drug pricing debate and current COVID crisis, policymakers are trying to strike the right balance between preserving incentives for innovation that will lead to the commercialization of new drug products and lowering prices for of products that taxpayers are funding. The process of commercialization requires technology transfer. Tech transfer can be broken down into three phases. The first being submitting a disclosure, patenting an invention, and finally commercializing an invention as shown with the graphic on the right. Typically, an inventor will collaborate or partner with another company, which requires two entities to be well matched based on their needs and goals. For technology developed with federal funding, preference must be given to small private businesses with equal or greater capacity than larger businesses for production. I conducted a literature review for this project, and what I did was I developed unique search terms and phrases based on questions of interest. I also used common search engines such as Google, Google Scholar, and PubMed, and searched for sources on an NIH website. From there, I identified articles specifically targeting challenge areas, and based on those sources that I found, I established a time frame from 2003 to the present day. The only exception to this would be sources that would provide information on legislative pieces that have not changed or were previously introduced. So what can be done to ensure a fair price up for drugs? There are a number of existing pricing mechanisms or opportunities to introduce mechanisms to ensure a fair price for drugs developed from federally funded research. The first being the Fair Pricing Clause, which addresses the pricing of products from government-owned patents licensed by the NIH. This was, however, short-lived and removed in 1995 due to concerns that it would discourage potential beneficial collaborations. More recently, however, S1681, which was unsuccessful, utilized the Reasonable Pricing Clause and required those who undertake federal funding for R&D of drugs to enter into reasonable pricing agreements with the Secretary of HHS. One opportunity is to improve Medicare Part D negotiation through enforcing tax on drug manufacturers that refuse to agree on a fair price and issuing competitive licensing. The Medicare and Competitive Licensing Act of 2019 ensures that if the Department of HHS and drug manufacturers are unable to successfully negotiate an appropriate price, the Secretary shall authorize the use of any patent, clinical trial data, or any exclusivity granted by the federal government. Similarly, the Lower Drug Prices Now Act would have required the Secretary of HHS to negotiate with drug manufacturers over the domestic prices of certain high-priced drugs. Lastly, we have opportunities to lower drug prices through R&D related interventions, such as push, pull, and pooling mechanisms. Likewise, there are a number of IP-related mechanisms to lower drug prices. The Bayh-Dole Act of 1980 grants titles to certain recipients of federally funded R&D and encourage recipients to develop inventions or license others for commercialization. This act established the march-in rights, which allows the government to license third parties for patents that resulted directly from federally funded R&D. We also have Section 1498, or compulsory licensing, which allows the government to override patent protection and issue a license to manufacture and distribute a given drug at low cost in the interest of public health. Next, we have two unsuccessful pieces of legislation that are important. The first being the Flat Prices Act, which shortens the relevant periods of regulatory exclusivity for a pharmaceutical product if the manufacturer increases the price by more than a certain percentage within a specified time frame. The second is the Prescription Drug Price Relief Act, which grants the Secretary of the HHS to waive or void any government-granted exclusivities and issue open and non-exclusive compulsory licenses if prices of brand name drugs and biologics are deemed excessive. To reflect public contribution to scientific developments, royalties can be returned to the government to support future public funding of science, which could lead to new advancements in technology. Implementing mechanisms to lower drug prices, however, will not be simple. There are numerous difficulties surrounding the implementation of an enforcement mechanism. It is also important for a fair pricing clause to ensure fairness and effectiveness in a way that fosters development and commercialization of biomedical innovations. The key takeaway is that we can promote adequate access to affordable medication developed with federal funding while incentivizing the development and commercialization of new drug products by revising reasonable pricing guidelines and creating a well-designed and well-enforced fair pricing condition.